for now at least. I've already done a couple of videos about this. I was talking about the technique, about how I'm practicing this. If you missed this, you'll find it up here. Now, after we talked about all this stuff, in this video we'll finally get to the real shit. Interpreting the piece. If you thought that interpreting pieces is easy, you just have to listen to your instinct, to your stomach, to other recordings and imitate them, well, I'm sorry. I have to tell you, this is by far not enough. Every time we're learning a new piece, the goal is to own the piece, to make it ours. And therefore we have to analyze the piece, and out of this analysis we want to get our own ideas for interpretation. Which is like, you know, the most interesting part of all the things that we are doing at the instrument. Now, of course, your instinct is still very important. And also listening to other interpretations is important. It can give you ideas and it can give you new impulses after you studied a piece for a longer time. However, I would always recommend to first find your own interpretation before you get like all these influences by others. So in this video we're going to do a short musical analysis of the piece, and then I'll show you different possibilities of how to interpret the things that we just analyzed before. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell, because I can see that only 30% of the people who are watching my videos are actually subscribed to my channel, so go and hit the subscribe button now. And also, creating these videos, especially this type of video, is taking a lot of time and effort. So if you would like to see more videos like this in the future, please consider supporting me on Patreon. You will find the link in the description box. Now let's get started. Now, before we go into, the detailed analysis of harmony, melody, rhythm, and stuff like this, all these parameters that we have to analyze, I would like to first see the big background. We always have to also put the pieces in historical context. For example, in this case, who had a big influence on Frédéric Chopin? Chopin was a huge fan of Johann Sebastian Bach, and yes, he's called Bach. Not Bach. He got a lot of inspiration through Bach's music, especially through his wohltemperiertes Klavier, so this big collection of preludes and fugues that are going through all the different keys. Chopin himself, he studied these preludes and fugues very, very intensively, and he would also recommend this for his students and to anyone who wants to learn piano. And Chopin also composed 24 preludes, which are, the most obvious homage to Johann Sebastian Bach. But also the etudes he composed, which were, by the way, also 24 until, the 3 later ones, they don't really count into this collection. So 24, and the very first one, Opus 10 number 1, is written in C major, just like Johann Sebastian Bach is starting his very first Preludium and Fugue.
Coincidence? I think not!
And also, Bach considered his wohltemperiertes Klavier as kind of a study. Maybe not in the same way. I mean, the etudes are more going into this technical thing. However, they're still also a musical study. So let's keep this link to Bach in our head while we are analyzing the rest. Let's start with the analysis of different parameters. In this video, I won't go through all the parameters, but normally when I'm analyzing pieces, I would go through at least the harmony, the melody, the dynamics, the rhythm, articulation, and the color of the piece. These are like the standard parameters that you should always analyze and consider in your interpretation. However, as this video is not giving me enough space, I will just reduce it on the main things that I found here. So let's start with the harmony. This piece is written in C major. C major is nothing special, you might think. However, when we play pieces in C major, it always gives us this big feeling. It's like a bright day, the sun is shining, it's majestic. This is what C major is very, very often expressing. As we said before, C major is also a link to Johann Sebastian Bach, which makes it even bigger. Now, during the first bars, there's nothing really happening. It's like a normal cadenza. So Chopin is like really settling this home key, let's say. In measure 17, he's changing into A minor. Then he continues and modulates through different keys. I won't go into detail here. And basically he ends in E major. Followed by falling fifth, adding like a little bit of salt and pepper here and there. I won't go into the details here, how he is transforming it, but the end result is A major. And he makes us feel like we're back in C major, which is not true. We are in A major. So as an interpretation, we can think, well, something is changing in this A minor part. Things are getting a little bit weird, and we are basically searching for the way back home. In A major, we think that we are back home, or we found a new home. However, it's not stopping there. He's continuing with falling fifth, and it's like dropping more and more and more. And also you can hear some dissonances here and there, which is like basically creating like all these dark thoughts. And this circle that we're turning in is going faster too. If you look at the harmonical rhythm here, before, like for example at the very beginning, we have 2 measures of C major, and then things are changing like in steps of 1 full measure. And now here Chopin is speeding up and the harmonical rhythm is going in half measures.
I want some jump, I got it. Some jump, I want some jump, I got it. Some jump, I want some jump, I got it.
Безумная распродажа на Джо.
I got it.
And after all these falling fifth, it's like he's fighting back to light. He's adding all these sharp notes here, which are basically indicating that it's going to be lighter, like the color is getting lighter, and then back to C major. And we are starting all over again. There we have the reprise. So in this whole middle part, we are basically searching all the time for the new key or the new home. We kind of find something in this A major part, but it's not the real thing. It doesn't really make us feel like we are at home, and we're continue searching and searching and searching. We're getting a lot of dark thoughts, and at the end we manage to come out of all these dark thoughts and go back to the home key. This part is one of the most interesting parts where I would like to talk a little bit more about it. What you normally hear is that this climax is like, it's getting huge. There's a lot of forte and a fortissimo even, and when you come back into the reprise, everything is like shining as it was in the beginning, or even bigger. At least this is the interpretation that you can hear like most of the times. However, I think there are reasons to say we can do it differently here, and I'll explain this with the dynamics. Now, if we take a look of the dynamics in this piece, we can see that everything is written in forte. So we start in the beginning with forte, we have some diminuendo, crescendo in the middle, then we have a forte again when it comes to the fake home in A major, so it makes us really feel like we are home, which is not true. The third time when it's written forte is directly before we go to the reprise, but not on the reprise. So it's like a few measures before. We have this big climax coming up, this crescendo, and this crescendo ends in a forte. Forte, not fortissimo, by the way. As you might know, I'm also studying all the other etudes right now, so I have to put the etudes in relation to each other. Now, if I take a look at the other etudes that are coming after this first etude, for example, in number 3, there is a fortissimo. In number 4, there is a FFF, I don't even know how to call it, fortissimo, I don't know. What is this called actually? I don't know. In German we just say dreifach forte, 3-time forte. Is there actually a word for this? Put it in the comments if you know this. So I have to put this first etude in relation to the third, the fourth, and everything that is coming after. When I compare this, forte is just a forte. It is not more than this. I think for the interpretation of this piece, we should just not, push too much and like making it forced. I think it should be a warm, big sound which is already created very easily. You don't have to, push into the keys so heavily. And also, when we see this part, when it comes back to C major, the reprise, it is not written forte on the reprise, it is written before, and then there is actually written a diminuendo. There is not really written on which dynamical level we should, and Chopin is giving us a lot of freedom, of interpretational freedom. Maybe he wanted it to stay in forte, maybe he wanted it to go much, much deeper, who knows. I think we have different interpretation possibilities here. The mainstream interpretation is to keep it in forte, or even louder than forte, which I think is maybe not exactly what is written there. The other direction would be to get this big climax and then slide into mezzo forte, mezzo piano maybe even. Something that is more calm, more in our heart, like inside and not too much pushed outside. So I think these two possibilities of interpretation are very, very different. I would like to show you how it would sound like with these two different interpretations. Another reason why I think that we should play the reprise differently from the beginning, also in the dynamics, is that we went through a lot of stuff in the middle part of this piece. Like, we had a lot of changes in harmonies, it was a lot of insecurity there, we were turning around all the time, and finally we find back. And during this time, our point of view is changing. There's time that is passing by, and it is changing us as person. We are seeing things differently afterwards. So I would also like to have a different color in the reprise than we had before in the beginning of the piece. What would you prefer? Tell me in the comments down below, and also why do you prefer this? This video is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning platform where you'll find thousands and thousands of great classes about like a lot of different topics, from music theory to cooking, painting, photography, and also video editing. As I'm editing all my videos on my own, I was searching for nice classes so I can improve my skills here and create better videos for you. Right now I'm following a class by Jordi Vandeput. I don't know if this is correctly pronounced, but I'm sorry. In this class, Jordi is going through advanced tips and tricks for video editing in 34 lessons, and I'm already excited to try to integrate it in my future videos. Skillshare has a great offer here for you. The first thousands of my subscribers who click on the link in the description box will get 1 month free trial on Skillshare. Don't waste any time, go and explore Skillshare on your own. I hope this video gave you new ideas and new perspectives of listening to this piece. It's a wonderful study, and of course this analysis was very small. As I said before, I didn't go into all the different parameters. I just don't have enough time for it. You know, creating these videos takes a lot of time and effort, and if you would like to see more of this in the future, I would be very happy if you support me on Patreon. You'll find the link in the description box. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell. We'll see us in the next videos. Bye.
Music is experienced through time, which is why tempo is extremely important. And I find that the tempo can really make or break a performance or a track. So how is it that we find the perfect tempo for a piece of music? In this video, I'm going to cover 9 things to remember that aren't so obvious. The last 2 are ones that personally help me the most. But first, let's cover the basics. Simply going by feel is often good enough because we're able to tell right away if something is a little too fast or slow. But for myself personally, sometimes when I'm a little more nervous than usual, or tired, sleepy, hungry even, I feel tempo a different way. So just going by feel isn't always the most reliable, I find. Let's do a quick comparison to speech. Let's say we want to apologize. That's what we want to communicate. And we're going to use the words, "I'm so sorry." Imagine saying these words with different tempi, with a different pace. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So I know my voice was changing slightly from one to the next, but the main thing that was changing was the pace. And depending on how slow or fast I was saying those words, the phrase takes on a different meaning, a different sincerity, and it hits you a different way. And in reverse, if you know more specifically about what you're trying to communicate with the music, the tempo will come more naturally to you. What I think is very helpful to do in the beginning is to describe in words the character of the piece. I'm going to play Chopin's Opus 10, number 3. For me, this music has a lot of warmth, embrace, longing, and also a little bit of a nonchalant quality. I think that comes from the left hand. This rhythm. So this is one of those pieces where most people play it much slower than the written metronome marking. Chopin's marking is 8th note equals 100, which is this. I find that it's a bit dense because there are inner lines happening, and this is what perhaps makes people play this at a slower tempo. Also, in analyzing the music, I think it's very helpful to observe the harmonic pace, or in other words, how often is the harmony changing in the music versus the density of the notes. The harmony is moving at a moderate pace. I wouldn't say that this is overly complex. Let's imagine this melody at a higher register with less notes. I think then this tempo will make sense. So I've been playing this etude for many years, and I've always chosen a slower tempo. It was simply something that I was just used to from all of the recordings and performances that I've heard of this piece. But recently, I think there's also potential for the faster tempo, and I find it a little more appealing. Maybe not completely 100, but closer to it. it really depends on the piano, but if I also focus on the lilting aspect of it, I start to hear the melody in a different way, in a more casual, flowing way instead of this really heavy, warm, profound way. So I don't know, I think these kinds of things shift, and there's always room for changing interpretations.
There is no one objective, ideal interpretation that is impervious to criticism or impervious to some degree of change and variation. And even some of the greatest pieces of music could do with certain changes of speed, general speed, or within the pieces of music.
I really love how Vladimir Ashkenazy is talking about tempo here and interpretation. And one thing to note is that most of these pieces in classical music repertoire don't have a static tempo throughout the whole piece. It's constantly shifting. If you added rubato, it's always in flux. And depending on the piece and the different movements involved, there is a wide range of tempi within a section and within a piece. This next point applies to some genres more than others, especially if you're playing other people's music. Consider the tradition. This will offer you a lot of insight. And from there you can choose to follow it or go your own way.
You are about to hear a rather, shall we say, unorthodox performance of the Brahms D minor concerto.
So this is Leonard Bernstein giving a full disclaimer to the audience before performing with Glenn Gould.
A performance distinctly different from any I've ever heard, or even dreamt of for that matter, in its remarkably broad tempi and its frequent departures from Brahms' dynamic indications. I cannot say I am in total agreement with Mr. Gould's conception.
So this goes on a little while longer. It's basically Bernstein's long and eloquent way of saying, listen, I don't agree with Glenn Gould's tempo, but I respect the man, which is why I'm here today. And I just think it's very interesting how he appeals to the audience and warns them that this tempo is really against what they're used to, against the tradition. And speaking of Glenn Gould, I really love his tempo choices, not because I would follow them, but because he makes them convincing, and I think that's what matters the most.
Your aim is to deliver as your concept is, to be true to your concept, to be true to what you've been preparing, right? But you can be influenced by various aspects.
We often forget about where we'll be performing and playing it eventually.
You can be influenced by acoustics, by the type of the instrument you have, where pianists always have different pianos, by even the state of mind, as I said. Nobody can be totally not nervous. You know, something happens to you when you deliver. And you should be prepared for that too.
Say that you're playing Presto by Poulenc. So the notes here in a very dry setting are relatively clear, and you can hear all of these changes. I'm going to simulate a hall with a lot of reverb here, synthetically, and then I might choose a slightly slower tempo just so that I can hear the clarity of the notes. And also I can retain some of the bounce and the humor in the music and not have these notes get lost in the reverb. The next point here is favoring accuracy over tempo, to an extent, because sometimes this really does not matter as much. You can compromise a little bit of the accuracy to have a more exciting tempo. But in general, if you really want a fast tempo, but you're always on the verge of disaster, maybe let go of the tempo a little bit. For example, this etude, Chopin's Opus 10 No. 2, it's extremely difficult, and although I would love to play it at a really fast tempo, something like this, especially after a page or so, my hands would just get too tired, and in that way the performance would suffer. So I would just choose a slightly slower tempo. Sometimes when we're listening to a piece over and over again, too many times, how we feel it and how we perceive the tempo shifts. For example, during the first week that you're learning this piece, this tempo feels right. Whereas the next week, when you're more comfortable with it, this feels like the right tempo. I find that especially in front of the computer, when I'm playing back something over and over again, by the end of the day, I might hear it a little differently. So it's always best to maybe switch gears to something else and then come back to it, or just wait until the next day and give your ears a break. Another thing that is really helpful is to imagine in the moment that you are someone else listening to yourself play. So it's just forcing yourself to separate the listening side of you and the playing side of you. Get into the habit of self-monitoring. Record yourself on a regular basis, whether it's while practicing or performing. Just document what you're doing and keep those files. Listen to the files. Don't just hoard them and keep them stashed away in a hidden folder in your hard drive. I know it's uncomfortable to listen to your performances back, but do it anyway. It's not my favorite thing, but I do it because it offers me so many insights. So do that. Consider all of the other things I mentioned in this video, and I hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments what you thought. And a special thank you to my patrons on Patreon, and thank you all for all of your continued support on this channel. Thank you so much, and I'll see you very soon. Maybe a little too slow? Or fast? I don't know.
Hi, I'm Sean Levine. I'm a writer, an artist, an editor, and a creative writer.
Hello everyone, my name is Narisol. I'm a pianist composer, and on my channel I create videos covering a variety of subject matter when it comes to music. Everything from composition, piano technique, studying different genres, and also breaking down different composers' styles. That series is called How to Sound Like, and I covered Franz Liszt last year. How to sound like Franz Liszt. If you've seen the video already, you may remember that I referenced a trip to Weimar to research more on Franz Liszt.
All those great musicians came to Weimar, to this really tiny place, and they were